record. Okay. So today, it's a great honor to have here with us Dr. Kamiar Kordari, who is the Chief Innovation Officer at Sprain, a company that was formerly the Elite HRV company. Dr. Kordari is the CIO, leading innovations that power digital health, wellness, and fitness experience with heart rate variability-based biomarker insights. As an engineer, executive, and startup investor, he is passionate about turning science-based research into impactful products. And we are very, very excited to have you here, Kamiar. Thank you again for accepting our invitation and for sharing your experience and the great innovations and innovative projects that we are leading at Sprain now, right? So thank you very much. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen here so you can share your slides, Kamiar.
All right, thank you very much. It's an honor to be invited to this series of talks. I'm going to start sharing my slides.
And while you're sharing, just let everyone know, if you have any question, any comments, you can put your questions on the chat, okay? And also we have some time at the end for you to address Kamiar with any questions or comments as well, okay? But feel free to put your questions and comments in the chat, and then I can bring the questions if it's related to specific things he's talking, or we can at the end make sure we address all the questions. Thank you. Go ahead, Kamiar.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. So let's get started. So let me tell you about my background a little bit. By training, I'm an engineer. So I'm not a medical doctor. I just want to set up your expectations. But the closest I've got to being a medical doctor is I did my master's in biomedical engineering. I early on become very interested in how brain and the nervous system controls the body, and started understanding it and modeling it using the engineering tools. So my expertise in signal processing and machine learning, and applying those tools on large amounts of data to understand the patterns. And I love building products. I love to do it in the context of startups. And I've been part of 2 startups that went from idea to being acquired. And I also help other startups as investor and help them grow. So far, I've invested in 6 unicorn startups, and this is something that I love to do. So I'm putting my email here as I'm going through the slides and talking about HRV. If you relate to the ideas and things that I talk about, please feel free to reach out to me. We have an open approach to research. I'm working with universities and researchers, and we welcome conversations if there is a way for us to collaborate. So I'm the company that I work at, Elite HRV, is the #1 app in the App Store when you search for HRV. It is being used in 70 countries, 700,000 app users. And over the years, we've been collected a lot of data for HR, HRV, and also a lot of contextual data. I'll talk more about why that contextual data is important in my slides. And we've worked with 117 universities directly and indirectly for research partnerships. So now we are building Sprain, and Sprain. So Elite HRV was direct to consumer. Sprain is we're working on partnering with companies. So basically, we're building the SDK and API and the software that our companies can use to measure HRV and also being able to collect and understand HRV-based insights. So if you go to sprint.com, you get more information, and you will understand more about what we're doing. So I'd like to start with why. So why HRV? Why is HRV important? So basically a zoom out view of HRV and why is it increasingly becoming important? Especially there's a lot of big changes happening in when you look at the market. So and HRV is playing a major role in it. So I want to start with that before getting into the physiology related information. So HRV in 60s and 70s, there was major studies to understand HRV and what it means and why is it useful. So the medical community starting using it, and the top 3 practices that use this in their studies are OBGYN, cardiovascular, and neuroscience disciplines that start using it, and it find applications in patient care and treatment, especially with people that are seriously they have serious conditions. On the other side of the spectrum, athletes, the professional athletes, Olympian, those that wanted to perform at the world-class level, starting using HRV. So there was a gap in between. And now that gap is filling up. So there's this rise of wellness market. So basically it's for everyone else in between. Those who don't necessarily want to win gold medal in the Olympics, those who are not seriously ill, but normal people that want to improve their quality of life. So modern life is stressful, there's competition, there is pandemic, there are wars, pollution, the diet is bad. And people are showing this signs of pain, this chronic pain doesn't go away, fatigue, low productivity, lack of motivations, stress, anxiety, things like that. And they just want to be healthier, they just want to sleep better, they just want to live longer, they want to manage their disease, they want to lower the inflammation. So these are the kind of goals that they have. But the traditional models of healthcare is not helping with those unless they get ill. So that is changing, and so there's this new demand from the consumer side that they want to be actively engaged in their quality of life and being healthier. And then there are technologies that are we call exponential technologies that are basically massively changing what's possible. So that includes the smartphones. Now 6 billion people have smartphones in their hand. There are all sort of wearable devices that measure all sort of different things from the body. The sensors embedded in the house in different places, and everyone is connected. So the data can be collected easily. The data can be communicated to the servers and be collected, and then there's artificial intelligence that can run on this large amounts of data to make sense of that data and then help people to improve their life. And this is we're talking about things that are outside of the medical space. It's just people showing a lot of interest, and then the startups and the companies are responding to this demand, and the new generation of startups that are showing up, new business models that are responding to this demand, and it's giving rise to this wellness industry. And we're not talking about a small industry. So it's an industry that's going to be larger than the healthcare industry by 2040. So this is a prediction from Deloitte. So it shows the amount of money that is going from healthcare into wellness, and showing the blurring of the line between healthcare and wellness. So this is the amount of opportunity that's out there, and how big this market is getting. So by the way, I've put links under the slides if you want to find the resources. Just give an understanding of how much activity out there is. There was just 71,000 health and fitness apps just in 2020 alone. And when you look at the map of the market, there are all sorts of these pockets of and subsegments of the market that are being created. Some are focused on fitness and tracking, some are focused on senior people, focused on cognitive health, focused on women health, diabetes, respiratory, sleep, and all these markets are being built and grown, and the money is flowing into these spaces. So one of the things that will enable a lot of these companies and a lot of these products is being able to understand the physiology of a person, being able to measure that. So in a very easy way, in a way that is accessible to everyone, and being able to make sense of it and quantify different states in the body. So quantify the mental health, quantify the functioning of the body, different things. And then using this, so going from this layers of information, going from the raw sensor data to biomarkers like HRV, to insights, so basically looking at the changes of this biomarkers over time and correlating with other information, putting in the context for that user and what they do and what's their lifestyle, and then understanding the progress, the cycles, and different things related to stress or physical progress, their sleep quality, things like that, and then use all this information to guide the person. It's a personalized guide, meaning that we are all different in the way our body responds to different things, how our body makes progress. So understanding that and then guiding them. So this is the core of this wellness, and this is what we're building at Spran. Basically, that's our value, the layers of value we're providing. So the main question there was, how do we quantify how body responds to change, right? So that's the big question. How do we quantify? So if you want to put a number on, quantifying, how body is responding, and that will give us an understanding to be able to make all those layers of insight and guidance and personalization. So to be able to do that, we need to understand homeostasis. So these feedback loops in the body, there are a lot of them, controlling and regulating different things in the body, like blood sugar, pH level, the temperature, heart rate, respiration rate. So a simple model and diagram of a control system looks like this. That's pretty much the simplest model we can think of for the feedback loops in the body. So there is a system that has an output, and there's a set point that is the desired output, and the controller looks at the difference of what's the current output, what's the difference between the set point. So there's an error, and the controller take action to reduce that error to 0. So the simplest thing is the body temperature. So the temperature has to be at a certain point. If there's a difference, the controller, which is the nervous system, will figure out and take an action to do things in the body to reduce that error, right? So there is a controller, basically the nervous system, that decides what action to take. There's system, which is all the organs and everything in the body that does things. And then there's the sensors in the body that collects information from the body. So one thing about this, why this feedback loop exists, why is this in this form? Because having this closed loop feedback loops makes it possible to respond to stress when it changes, when it disturbance. So basically, this closed loop is stable at around a set point. So if the system is disturbed around that set point, it will come back to that set point I was set to, right? That's the nice thing about this. And this is, so this is like control systems that we see in robots. We see them in the self-driving cars, in your thermostat. So this is the main concept. So the main feature of it is the stability, to be able to bring a system back to that stability point, that set point. So there are all sort of stressors in the body. There are some physical, digestive, what you eat, the kind of emotions you may have, the mental stress. So these are all disrupting your physiology. And the role of this feedback loop is to change back your physiology to that set point that needs to be. So these set points are not fixed in time, they change. So some of them change faster, some of them change much slower. So you can go from set points that are changing every second to those that change every hour, every day, every month, every season, even things that are changed in a lifetime. So, for example, here you can see the cortisol level that is changing every 24 hours in sync with the circadian cycle. So that's the set point changing, and the loops, the loops that regulate these values, their job is to follow that set point as those are changing. So the controller is the nervous system, specifically the autonomic nervous system, which has two branches, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic side. So sympathetic is like gas, parasympathetic on brake. So they slow down, they make it fast. They have different processes to activate things in the body to make that going back to the set point possible. So sympathetic is the fight or flight. It's when the stress happens. So sympathetic kicks in, does whatever is needed for survival to make the changes related to react to those stressor. Parasympathetic is the opposite. The brake is the rest and digest. It is for long term needed, so it returns back the system to its basically long-term goals. And there are sensors. So in that feedback loop, the sensor was the part of the feedback was happening. So there are all sort of sensors throughout the body, and they're measuring different types of things. Some are chemical sensors, some are temperature sensors, some are mechanical sensors. That's how the nervous system gets information about that error and the deviation from that set point. And the nervous system, the controller acts upon increasing that error. So that have a couple of different forms. One thing is the direct stimulation. The other is to release hormones to basically create an impact. So the hormone, it takes some time for it to release, but when it's released, it's more lasting. So the sympathetic activity usually involves a release of a hormone that lasts a longer. For example, the adrenaline is known for something that is released when there is a fight or flight situation. So back in that question of quantifying the functioning of the body and how the body responds to change. So we talked about that feedback loop, the control loop, and how the changes are managed. So one way to quantify that, how good this controller is working, is so. By the way, different controllers can be optimal, they can be suboptimal. So in the optimal case, it requires minimum amount of activity and energy to regulate. But if it is suboptimal, it may overshoot in the amount of things that needs to be done to overcome like a stress, especially if the body is exposed to something unfamiliar for the first time. It overshoots. It does more than what's needed, and over time it kind of learns what's the optimal way to deal with a situation, and does a better job of doing it. So and the way like an athlete's body responds to a physical stress is different from how somebody who is not working out responding to the same amount of stress. So this control mechanisms can be much more advanced. It can be much more optimal in terms of the amount of energy they're using to take care of the situation. So the activity of this autonomic nervous system, if we can measure it, can be a measure of how the body is responding to change. So basically, if the activity is low, it is showing that, oh, this is a very optimal control mechanisms with the least amount of energy is being able to take care of the energy. So thinking of activity of autonomic nervous system as the capacity of the body to adapt to stress and change. And when we say stress, we don't mean mental stress. We mean any kind of thing that disrupts the physiology. So it can be physical. So it can be like it can be a workout that you do. It can be a food that you eat. So there are different ways to measure this activity of ANS. So we just want to look at the other option and see which one makes sense. So a lot of these that you see here, I'm not going over them, are invasive. They may require directly connecting to the nervous system. They may include medical facilities to be able to run this, measure things, different kinds of equipment needed. And then you see heart rate variability there as a candidate. So when you go look at our options, and we're thinking about the wellness industry, we need something that normal people can use it every day. They can use it without going to a medical facility. It needs to be something that measures both the sympathetic and parasympathetic activities. So going back, those methods there, only there's one that checks all these criteria, and that's heart rate variability. That's why we love it. This is the best candidate to basically as a marker of body-wide function. It's a proxy to measure the autonomic nervous system activity. So what is HRV? And so now we measure HRV. We now can quantify how good the body is functioning, right? So that's how far we got so far. So when you look at the ECG and look at the QRS complex, so at the R you see the spikes. So the time between the spikes is the time of the pulse, each pulse. So that pulse is not constant. It's not a constant time. It keeps changing. So the amount fluctuates, and those fluctuation is the variability that we're talking about. So the greater variability in an AR means a lot of change happening. That means the parasympathetic is being active. When that fluctuation decreases, it means the sympathetic activity is active. So this is very interesting because now we can quantify both of these branches and include that in our understanding of the body. So this is a chart that shows HRV is influenced by many different factors. So there are physiological, there are Neuropsychological factors or lifestyle factors, age, gender, ethnicity, the environmental factors, they all impact HRV because they all impact the ANS, right? So the ANS impacted, HRV is impacted. So it's a very complicated, metric. It has a lot of information, but it needs to be corrected and interpreted in the right way. So this just shows the RR intervals, and you can see how the pattern changes as the person is doing different types of activities. So here you see the person at rest, you see that person doing arithmetic, here doing exercise, and this is another person just having some severe heart condition. So you see that how the R interval is changing as a result, HRV changing. So just to give a visual of how these changes look like. So HRV is a proxy of ANS activity. ANS activity changes during the day, HRV changes during the day, right? So there's a circadian rhythm, the body temperature changes, the hormones changes throughout the day, the metabolism and eating, and a lot of stress happening throughout the day, the news, work, relationship, they all impact the nervous system, therefore they're impacting HRV, right? Okay, so we said HRV can capture both parasympathetic and sympathetic activities. So let's, through an example, understand that. So let's say this is showing someone doing training. So we are using the context of fitness, right? So the stress is someone doing an exercise, right? So when you do an exercise, the sympathetic activity is shown by red. So it was no activity, and then exercise, the sympathetic activity started rising, and because doing an exercise is stress to the body, so the body needs to react to that, right? So sympathetic reacts to that stress. If it is too much, it may result in taking actions, like even it can get to inflammation, right? If it is like an exercise that is like person's overloaded, and the exercise finishes, so the sympathetic now cools down, and then the parasympathetic kicks in, and they start to bring back the body to recovery. So the recovery starts, and then it goes through some time for the body to go back to this previous state, right? And then over time, it gets to this steady state situation, while the impact of the sympathetic side is gone. So this is a typical activity that can happen here. So when the sympathetic kicks in, the HRV starts going down. So let's say this was baseline of HRV, sympathetic comes in, the HRV goes down. Remember, the sympathetic activity reduces the variability, so it reduces HRV. Parasympathetic does the opposite. It increases the variability, and therefore it increases the HRV, right? So the HRV starts going down, and then here the parasympathetic kicks in, so the HRV starts going higher, right? So the body goes through the recovery. So if this is a mild stress, so the regulation happens successfully, everything is back to normal. This is the case of the more stress. So what happened here is the body didn't recover to the full. So the the sympathetic activity didn't go back to 0, and the full recovery didn't happen. So what happens is now think of a person doing a training over time. So there are periods of training and recovery that the person is doing, right? And the same thing is happening. So there's this chain of events, the sequence that are happening. And depending on how this person starts their exercise and depending on where they are in that recovery cycle, the body may improve or may stay in the same state or may go down in their performance level. So let's take a look. So here's the optimal training. The same thing happened. So it went down, parasympathetic kicked in, the recovery happened. That was the peak of recovery. And then after that, it was going down, right? So if the person starts working out at the peak, now they're at the better place from the time that they started, right? So if they start training at that point, they will add another cycle like that, and then they will end up higher in terms of their performance. Basically, the training is making progress. The person is getting stronger. They perform better, right? If they do it before getting to that peak, so they start lower, what happens is that trend will start going down. So basically, the person started putting stress before the body was fully recovered. So that's important to understand, that why tracking of this where the body is in that cycle is important, and why athletes at the world class level they are tracking this very carefully, because they want to know exactly where their body is in this cycle and adjust what they're doing based on that, right? So there are other things to think about. So the level of the intensity of the workout can also play an important, have an important role in the shape of this recovery and interaction. So if here the intensity of workout is too much, the body gets fatigued. So there's a huge sympathetic activity, and body performance drops a lot. There may be inflammation, and there may be excessive fatigue in the body. And then the body needs to the parasympathetic needs to overcompensate to make the recovery happen. So the recovery takes a longer time, first of all. So body will be in a lot of pain, and maybe the person feels low energy for a longer time. Again, another thing that is important if you want to optimize your fitness and workout, right? So understanding the amount of optimal load or intensity of the workout that you need to do. And then this is a workout that was too easy. So if it was too easy, the peak when the body comes back from the recovery, the peak is much lower. So basically the body didn't improve, it came back where it was. So starting the workout again will keep the body at the same level. So when you look at the HRV over time and average them out, kind of looking at the weekly trends, you will see that, like, for this person, the stress load is greater than the recovery. So the person has a down trend here. So the body is not even improving, it's just going down. This is a person that is doing easy exercise. So their HRV, the amount of load is equal to the amount of recovery they're doing. So the performance level is staying the same. And this is a person that is doing it optimal, the right amount of intensity, giving the right amount of time for recovery, and over time, the HRV is progressing. So this graph that by tracking HRV, we can see the progress in the body. So let's talk about readiness score. So HRV by itself is good, but the most useful information is when you look at the HRV over days, over some time, right? And you establish a trend for the person. So there's this readiness score that we calculate and we provide to the user. It's a daily indicator of daily stress or recovery, and what it does is we look at the trends over time, and we establish a baseline HRV for the person, and we measure how deviation they're having from that baseline. So we give them like scores like 5 is a scale from 1 to 10. So 5 or 6 means, okay, it was a moderate change in HRV, which is good, right? So you don't want a lot of change in HRV. Remember, if the intensity of workout is too much and the sympathetic activity is too much, there's a huge drop in HRV, right? So you don't want to go that, because you will have inflammation in your body as a result of that. So you want to have moderate, change. So this is a drop of moderate change on the sympathetic side. So that's the beginning of workout. And then body goes to recovery. That's when the parasympathetic kicks in. It shows on the scale that the parasympathetic is active now, getting a score of 6, which is good. So what is not good is a lot of change. So when there's a big drop in HRV, that means the sympathetic activity kicked in very intensely, right? So the amount of load for the workout was too much. So 3, that's a low score, means a big drop in HRV, and that's to the sympathetic spectrum. So the lesson here is, okay, that intensity of workout was too much, right? And then here is, again, when the recovery happens, the parasympathetic needs to kick in much more stronger to recover the body. So the HRV will increase a lot to take care of the recovery. So again, the low score of readiness on the parasympathetic side. And then this is the readiness score for 10. In the middle, it's where that peak is happening. So basically, that's when you work out. You want to start working out your next workout. So that optimal change of workouts that we saw, this is where the athlete knows where the peak is. So by knowing this morning readiness, the athlete gets a lot of guidance. They know what to do, like how to adjust the amount of workout they're doing, when to start the next thing. So it has a lot of information. So fitness was one example, but this can be applied to many different things. So when you think of the cognitive load of the brain, the same pattern happens. So you want to, let's say you're a student, you want to make progress, to improve things, you can do the same thing. The same thing happens in your brain. So when you start doing mathematics, your HRV drops in and you need some time to recover. And then at the end, you end up in a better place. So you want to sequence this in the right way, so you make improvements. So one important thing is to think about the absolute change in HRV numbers versus the relative changes, and these are things that are very highly individualized. It's different from person to person, and then establishing that baseline and understanding these changes is very important. So this could be a couple of interesting examples, so you get an understanding of HRV and how to analyze and interpret that data. So you have person A, the HRV was 55. By the way, this is the different metrics to measure HRV. Some are based on the time characteristic of the R interval. Some are based on the frequency characteristics. I don't have time to go into details, but so the HRV score that I'm showing here is a score going from 1 to 100, and it kind of shows the formula calculator is looking at the consecutive changes in the R interval, and then looking at the standard deviation of that, doing a logarithm on that, and then scaling it. So it's a number between 1 to 100. So let's say two people, they both have 55. Does that mean they're in the same place? Should they be treated the same? So what if I tell you the weekly average for one is 45, the other is 65? So for one person, they dropped, the other person increased their HRV. So now say, the one that dropped, they had a higher sympathetic activity. The other that increased, they had a higher parasympathetic activity, right? So that's one thing. So that's why it's important to establish the baseline. So now let's go to
Hey, come here.
yes.
One question here in the chat is that if the HRV here is the RMSSD or other parameter.
So the HRV here is ln RMSSD multiplied by a scaling factor to bring it between 1 to 100. Okay, so another example. So yesterday, this person, their HRV was 65, today is 60. Person B, the same, 65 yesterday, 60 today. The average HRV for both is 65. Should they be treated the same? Do they have the same, are they in the same place? So the answer is it depends. And so for example, here, if you know the covariance of coefficient of the CV coefficient of variance. So basically it says on a daily basis how many data points the HRV changes for the person. So for person A, if it is 6 to 7 points, person B is 2 to 3 points, right? So the change for person A is normal, but for person B, that's a drastic change, right? So it shows a higher activity for person B. So again, just by looking, so HRV is the information about the past, the information about the trend is very important. Coefficient of variation, so the average change on a daily basis. And let's talk about the context of HRV. So as we said, HRV captures the activity of the autonomic nervous system, and that activity can be related to a lot of different things because ANS regulates a lot of things in the body, right? So we see a change in HRV, we do not know where that change came in. Was that from doing a workout? Was it that from a cognitive load? Was it from stress? Was it from change in sleeping pattern? We don't know. So having that context is very important to be able to correlate this different things to HRV. So one of the things that we're collecting in that HRV app is this context and this understanding of all these different events that are happening in someone's life, and then using that information to see like how body is responding to different lifestyle choices, and then using that information to help the people to make improvements to those lifestyle choices. So the way somebody's body reacts to a stressor will be different, from somebody else's. So, for example, two people may eat rice, and then one person may have their glucose level may shoot up. The other person have like smallest amount of change in their glucose level, and then therefore, the impact of HRV. So it is very personalized. It's very individualized, And the context is very important. So these are some examples of why context is important and what kind of context we're interested in. So going from sleep to nutrition, to exercise, to mood. So by having this information, it helps to gives insight about for different things. So basically, if we correlate this information, different information, so sleep data, sleep quality, amount of sleep with HRV, we're able to give you information inside of where you are on sleep, and is it improving, is it degrading, and how to improve it. So this is, if you remember the layers of value, this is the guidance part, that with doing this kind of correlation, we're able to help the user to make improvements for specific things. So here are a couple of quick suggestions when measuring HRV. So you want to be consistent. So you want to eliminate as many variables as you can. So basically you want to do it at the same time every day, hopefully. So if you do it the first thing in the morning when you wake up, the temperature, the hormone level of your body is almost the same every day. So that's the best time of doing it. Before doing a reading, you want to rest for at least 30 seconds. So your heart rate is stabilized. You want to, the position that you are in, sitting or lying down, standing, the impact, standing is the least recommended. Lying down is the most favorite. During the reading, you don't want to do unnatural breathing because the breathing pattern changes your heart rate pattern. So there are two control loops that impacts that variability. So one thing is the control loop that regulates the blood pressure, and then there's another control loop that for the control of the respiration. And the impact of these two loops is the reason the variability in the HRV happens. So you don't want to breathe unnaturally, just do it the natural way so it doesn't impact it. There are a couple of, as I said, metrics to capture that variability. We can look into the time characteristics of the R interval, and then these are some of examples of metrics that can be calculated. There are frequency characteristic of the R interval. So here an example of, for example, how the frequency changes. So this is the frequency band for high frequency. This is low frequency. This is the frequency at rest. This is the frequency when tilted. So this part is correlated with the sympathetic activity. This part is correlated with parasympathetic. So when the tilt happens, it's a stress to body, so body reacts, the low frequency goes high. So anyways, these are the energy in each of those frequency bands are different metrics to look into, and each are correlated with different things. So the parasympathetic and sympathetic activity, the blood pressure, the respiration information shows up in those frequency bands. So that was it. A lot of information. I went so fast. So we have a couple of minutes. If there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Kamia. A really, really great presentation. I'm glad I recorded it because it's a great introduction to like our new researchers and students. And thank you also for giving like a background about the physiology and the autonomic nervous system. It was really a great presentation. And I'm going to open here, see if we have any questions. You can either send your question in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and ask a question. Kamia. So I'm going to start here. I have a few questions. So our group, we've been using heart rate variability was like the first biometric that we start like playing and exploring in our research 5-6 years ago now. So we've been using heart rate variability as a proxy for cognitive load during medical tasks. So we're measuring surgeons, anesthesiologists, perfusionists, and nurses. This is a project led by Dr. Marco Zanetta at the VA, Harvard, as a measure of cognitive load during real surgeries, right? And we've been exploring the relationship between HRV metrics and some things that happen in the OR, some stressful events, some medical errors, or even some specific steps, right? But we always also explore HRV as cognitive load in the simulation environment here at the Stratus, with some medical emergency simulations, some work we have for NASA, trying to measure cognitive load of like astronaut-like participants during medical emergencies in space. So we have like a spacecraft simulator here. And more recently, we also explore HRV at rest among emergency department providers, right, during the pandemic as a measure of burnout, as a proxy for burnout, PTSD, moral injury, and other more chronic constructs, right? And one challenge we have in all this research, right, is it's, as you mentioned, right, there are some factors like age, gender, and fitness and weight, right, that really impact the HRV. So how to normalize? Do you have any like best practice to normalize the metric you have during a test to that specific person, the way that you can compare different people?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's one of the things with HRV, that it's impacted by many things, and that context becomes really important. So basically, as what it needs is to kind of decompose and separate the impact of different things that are happening at the same time. So in case of, for example, someone is doing a cognitive load, but at the same time they're moving, so the movement is having increasing activity in the nervous system, the cognitive load is doing it. There may be stress depending on how the surgery goes, that can be another load. So one thing about HRV is you know, it's one number that is capturing all the activity of the nervous system, right? So the challenge is, how do we separate these things, right? So it's you know, we recommend that to isolate these things as much as possible. That's we recommend, you know, when people are collecting HRV, not to move. You know, do the first thing in the morning. Don't do anything at the time. Just sit there or lie down and then measure it, because these things, you know, impact it. These things have an impact, and HRV is very, very, you know, sensitive, and so we know that you know, the activity level increased, but it's much harder to, you know, separate those. So we are not really focused on those kind of applications, but it's definitely it's a, you know, the research that needs to be done on you know, those projects, and figure out, you know, what's the best way of doing it.
Yeah.
So the way we are looking also, so one-time measurement of HRV by itself is a good data point, but it's really the trend over time that, you know, when it comes to wellness, we are interested in, that has a lot of more information at how body changes, like, you know, in a long time. So we are measuring 1 minute to 2 minutes of data to be able to do that. So we get, so the different types of HRV that you can collect. Some of them are short term, some of them long term. So the one that we're very focused on are 1 minute to 2 minutes, because with the wellness apps, that's how much, you know, people are comfortable to spend time every day to do it. But so having a shorter time has some impact. It may be, it's a lot less data to work with, but because it's happening on a daily basis, we have a lot of it over time, so we can do the baseline. So the case that you mentioned, so it's measuring the HRV during a couple of hours, probably, right? So the surgery is happening 2-3 hours, and then during that time we measure that, and then we want to basically associate something like cognitive load to that activity.
Yeah.
So maybe the one thing useful is to look into other types of sensory data that can be incorporated into that. For example, one of the things we're looking into is the eye tracking and how that is correlated with the cognitive load. There is the body temperature. That's another thing to look into. And then so each of this data is impacted in different way by different things. Like one of them may be not very much impacted by stress or movement, but it's impacted by cognitive load. And then combining all these things probably can be the key to, do that decomposition of the impacts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's certainly the direction we are going, because we have this variation. Then we start doing like collecting the baseline for each person, and then really creating like a normalization, like variation from their baseline. But even, and also we're very interested in like some more real-time metrics, right? Because one of the research we are doing, and I think George is here from the UMass team, is really trying to develop some system that can use the HRV information to inform the team in near real time, right? That, for example, that you can, one of the systems that we designed was like interruption management system, right? If you know the cognitive load of that person, and you have interruption to make, some interruptions are very important, right? And you have to make that interruption right away. But some interruptions in the operating room can wait, right? So you could like take a look on the cognitive load in real time of the surgeon and decide to interrupt the surgeon a little later, right? When the cognitive load is a little lower, something like that. So exploring different ways also to get some near real-time metrics and also make sense of the data and give back that data to the team in order to allow the corrective real-time feedback, right? And due to the sensitivity and some of this variation, also we're including like other metrics, mainly in the simulation. So you're doing skin galvanic response, eye tracking, pupil dilation, and EEG as well. What is more difficult to do in the real environment is to put all these devices in like surgeons, but in the simulation environment, we're being able to explore those. Any question from anyone?
Hello, everyone.
Go ahead, Lucas.
Yes,
so Jason.
Yep.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lucas. I'm a medical student here from Brazil. And what I want to ask is about some limitations there may be possible limitations, because as the presenter said, the population is getting, this is something about the precision medicine. So we talk about the future in 2040. The market's going to be really embracing this idea. So what I would like to ask is, around the world, the population is getting older. So in older patients, the homeostasis is a little bit compromised. So you have patients with fragility syndrome, for example. What I would like to ask is if HRV has some limitations in this kind of patients, older patients, where the homeostasis of the body is already, not responding very well, not adapting very well to this stressful, stressful everyday.
Yeah, definitely. The body degrades over time, and the way the sympathetic and parasympathetic respond to different stress changes over time. So the key is understanding and adjusting basically that those trend lines, adjusting what is normal now for this person, because with age, HRV drops. It's data clearly shows that it's happening. It's just the dynamics changes, and capturing the dynamics is important. I have some extra slides that shows. Yeah, this is showing the RMSSD. This is data collected from 8 million people, female versus female, different times of the day, and then by age. So this is showing the age and how what's the range of RMSSD. So this is for it doesn't have the ages, but it's going starting at, I think, 20-year-olds to goes to 70, 80, and you can definitely see there's a lot of drop happening. So what happens is definitely these changes there is just a matter of adjusting that personalization, that understanding, and adjusting that trade line. So age is definitely a factor when analyzing HRV.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Kimia.
Sure.
And anyone? Does anyone have a question? Okay. So, Kimia, I would like to ask you, because more traditionally, right, the RR intervals or like the IBI intervals that we use for HRV come from like EKG, right? But also, I know you're working some developments now to use different methods of capturing IBIs. If you could also share that with us, and if that application is already available or not.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, part of what we're doing as SPRAN is make it accessible for the companies that we're working with, make the HRV measurement accessible to them. So basically, one of the things that most people have is their smartphone, and there are ways to measure HRV and extract PPG from the camera on the smartphone. So we are building this as a solution that companies that integrate into their digital wellness app. And the way it works is, so there's, we look at the cardiovascular system. EEG is the input to the system. And then what happens is a series of mechanical events that result in pumping of the blood, and then the blood going into the tissues. And then as each pulse is happening, the volume change in the tissue changes, right? And with camera, you're able to zoom at the tissue and measure the changes in the color. So basically, as the volume of the blood changes in the tissue, the color of the tissue changes. It's not visible to the eye, but when you look at the camera and you look at the different channels in that image, so look at the red channel, green channel, blue channel, we see those number changes, right? So we see this cyclic, periodic event happening. And so we capture those, and they're highly correlated and sync with the EEG. So there are differences because as I said, EEG is the input to this mechanical system. PPG is the output gone through this mechanical and optical process to capture that. But it's a very accessible, easy, and very accurate way for capturing HRV every day. And it doesn't require any hardware. That's the beauty of it. It's just a software and the camera phone and the phone with the camera. And everyone will be able to measure the HRV every day. And then we use that data, and then over time make sense of it, and use it for all the benefits that we talked about today. So there are two ways to do it. One is using a finger over the camera. So that's basically this happens to any tissue in the body. So one is a way to put the finger or camera. The other way is the camera is looking at somebody's face, and then the information is extracted from their face. So yeah, that's something we're excited about, and we are helping our partners to basically impact lives by having this accessible to many people. There are devices and sensors to buy, but the hardware it's expensive. It's much harder to scale up, but with a solution like this, it's much easier for companies to make it available to the users at a much larger scale.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. That's very, very exciting. Okay, so we have a few more minutes. Any other question? Okay, sounds good. So thank you everyone for participating today, and thank you again, Camille, for your talk and your presentation. Really, really great. I'm sure this will be like a great resource, the recorded lecture, for, like, as I mentioned, to other researchers and other people who are interested in HRV. It's a great introduction, and thank you very much for coming today.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, sounds good. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.